How's everyone doing? Hope everyone's doing great today. So I wanted to do a show with Rob, but he got caught up with work, so we'll reschedule that. But I don't want to waste your time since a lot of you showed up. So I'll do a quick QA session. There was quite a few questions on Facebook. I asked those a while back. And then you guys, everyone who's here on the chat today, I'll try to answer those questions too. So here we go. Hope everyone's doing great today. I'm doing fantastic, I would say. A little sleepy because this is not my regular wake up time. It's early in the morning, but yeah, let's get to the doo-doos. It's a little ZBrush face that I'm working on. Anyway, so the first question, I'll read maybe the questions from Facebook, look through those, and if there's anything that is not interesting, I'll skip that. And then everyone who's here who want to ask questions, feel free. I'll track that and get you some answers. So first question was, how do you get that first job in game studio? What helps distinguish yourself from other artists and portfolios? This would be a great context of concept art and 3D characters and environments. I'm talking more generalist approach where I'm trying to open all my doors. All right, so I think I told that story how I got into games before. It was back in 2004, I believe. Yeah, 2004. And I was working freelance. I was doing some shitty freelance works. It was like $20 per illustration, something like that. I was pretty early in the days. It was pretty much when I was starting to get serious about becoming an artist. And I got offered to work on, it was like a redesign of, I believe it was Alistair character for Painkiller game. And it was like animation studio that was doing cinematics for that game. And by the way, if you've played Painkiller, you've probably seen the cinematics. They're pretty terrible. But that was like kind of the first offer to work on something, and I did an illustration that ended up on CEO's desk of the People Can Fly. The owner of the People Can Fly saw the image, he liked it, and one of the guys I was friends with, Sławek Latos, he was working there as a 3D modeler. I used to talk with him a lot on the forums. It was back in the days when there was forums, no Facebook and instant messaging. And he mentioned my name when he saw the image, because I've shown him that image too. And he talked to the boss, and they called me up, and that's where it all started. I had to work on the trial basis for a couple of weeks, and then I proved myself to be all right. So they kept me and was there for a couple of months and moved on to Crytek. So that's basically where it started. In the context of concept art and 3D characters and environment art, I've mentioned this a couple of times on the previous shows that 3D is becoming really important in pretty much all of the industries. But it's not super necessary yet. Like if you're only doing 2D concept art, you're still gonna get work. It's not like it's dead. No, it's by any means you can still be a 2D artist and work in the industry. A good testament of that is pretty much anyone at Naughty Dog. Eitan, Nick, and John. They are all painters. They all work as painters. So nothing much changed just yet. But I can tell you that, for instance, movie industry is moving towards 3D much more than video games industry. Quite a lot of artists in movie industry are working in 3D, not necessarily purely 3D, but quite a lot 3D is done in their work, and it's very useful, especially when you're considering like environments. So you would basically, do your base for perspective and whatnot. I use it on daily basis now. I'm about to drop some of the concept art for Ghost in the Shell in a couple of weeks when the movie's out, and you'll see what I'm talking about. A lot of work that I've done for that film is almost purely 3D. So it's moving towards that direction. So I would highly suggest learning. The only real measure in terms of whether you're gonna get hired or not is really the quality of your work. I think the best thing you can do to yourself is go on ArtStation and look at the picks, like what is being picked as the like the best works out there picked by the staff. And obviously there are themes that are not necessarily really that useful if you're considering yourself to be a concept artist. Chicks with armors and shit like that. That's not what's gonna get you hired in the first place. But if you look at the work that is being posted there and compare yourself to that work, then you will know whether you're good enough to be working in, say, a big studio. It's a different story if you're trying to get job in a smaller studio, maybe some mobile games and whatnot. But the market is really saturated, so it's really best to try the hardest to learn as much as you can and really push forward into that learning mode and try to get as best work as you can. And never stop learning. I would say that's the most important thing, because that will always get you get you far. And there's nothing like fucking what's his face, Shia LaBeouf says nothing is impossible, and I would agree a little bit with that. There are things that are obviously impossible, but I would never imagine myself doing stuff like I'm doing right now here. Whereas the beard here is just for splines. I export that as splines and do like the peach fuzz on the face, stuff like that. So it's not like a bearded woman here. But you can I've sculpted this character, did like the pores and sculpted the eyes, shit like that, and worked on that character. I've been posting this character quite a few times, different renders. I never imagined doing this before. I thought it was like I would have to have a whole career to do that stuff, and that's not true. I just decided, you know what, I want to learn this and see how far I can get. And every step of the way, the grand goal is to create like a cool image that I have in my mind, and I just broken it down into small pieces, and I'm just going piece by piece. First, refresh knowledge in ZBrush. Second, learn how to do likeness of a character. Third, go through the obstacles of learning different tools and whatnot. Everything is sort of like broken down into smaller pieces that I can tackle every day and every day and every day and every day. So I have a grand goal that is pushing me to do this, and then also a smaller bite-sized pieces that are manageable. Because if my grand goal is like create a fucking film from scratch with awesome VFX, like you could do that, but you will end up like this. discouraged because it's just such a big task that it's really hard to tackle. So yeah, so that would be like a long answer to the first question. Second question was, how about making a best quality design possible with minimal equipment? Yeah, so I know a bunch of people, myself included, that are trying to get into the big leagues and are limited by old and low power quality equipment. I'm asking because I know you went through it when you were starting out, even though I'm already 6 years or so into the working on the same damn laptop because I can't afford to upgrade. So when it comes to equipment, I'll tell you what I did. So I started with, back in 2004, I started with shitty freaking Dell computer that I bought from like secondhand from Office Clearance. And I think I paid like $100 for it. It was like absolute garbage. It couldn't handle Photoshop files that are bigger than 2000 pixels wide. And for the tablet, I worked as a janitor back then, and that's how I bought my computer. And the tablet, which cost 200, I think it was $150, was like this shitty old Pentagram. It had like battery in the pen. The pen was like super heavy, so I remember that, and I started working on that. And then my goal was any money that I was making that I could still, I was still living in with my parents, so it was kind of easier. But any money I made that wasn't necessary for living, I would spend on upgrades of the computer. So, and that's basically, that was my philosophy up until recently. So I always allocate a certain amount of budget that I will not spend on anything else, There's always choices you can make, go out with friends and buy books and go to the movies and whatnot. If you just consider yourself to start saving every month towards a larger goal, like let's say by the end of the year I want to have a couple of $1,000s saved, and instead of spending that on anything else, I'll invest into a computer. It's an investment that you have to consider. It hurts because when you're building a huge computer, it's almost like a choice between, should I build this powerful machine or maybe buy a used BMW? It's like you can have a car, like a good car, used car, or a computer. So it's kind of crazy, but it's an investment at the end of the day. And if you want to be doing work that can push, like if you want to push your work that extra edge, this is what you have to do. And Vitaly Bulgarov, you guys probably seen him posting those pictures. He has like 8 graphics cards in one computer. Myself, I have a pretty powerful machine. Ash, who has a pretty powerful machine. Like all of them have pretty powerful machines, but it's an investment. I consider it this way: I might spend 10 grand on a computer, which is a lot of money, but I know that this 10 grand over next 2 years will save me headaches of not delivering on time, or being able to deliver much more work in shorter amount of time, and then still bill for the same hours, because render times take time, or being able to produce much more quality is outright better than still being stuck with limitations of your hardware. So it's a matter of like judging how much you can afford, and if you only can afford to do small upgrades, then start with like what would be the best thing, like probably getting the good motherboard to start with, because that's usually gonna stick for the longest couple of years. I'm still using motherboard that was produced in 2013 or 14, and it's still useful, and even if I upgrade, it will still be good. So Let me read maybe next question from the chat. I don't want to miss any of the chat questions. Let's see. Software is expensive. Are there professional artists that use Blender for concept art? Yes, I would say there are, and Jama Jurbayev is a good example. He started using Blender and he's using it professionally. Now, there's obviously some limitations. I don't know specifically how good Blender is. I'm hearing it's great, but I've personally invested in 3ds Max. I would say it's a good idea to look into Maya, because Maya is an industry standard for VFX and video games. It's not that it's required for video games, but it's useful to know it, because most of the people that work in video games would use Maya. In film VFX, I would say it's required to know Maya. 3ds Max is good. Cinema 4D is more of a motion design, but I know a lot of matte painters are using Cinema 4D. Cinema 4D is pretty expensive though, but Blender is a good choice. At the end of the day, those are tools, and if you're working as an illustrator or concept artist, nobody will care what kind of software you're using. The most client's gonna care about is whether it's good or not, like whether your artwork is good or not. And all of them spit out OBJs, and the most I was asked for on most recent projects in terms of like what files should I be sending was OBJs. There were Ghost in the Shell is a different story, because I was sending CAD files to the production, which I'll talk about a little later. But that was initiative that I made. That wasn't required for me to do the job. That's something I did extra. Are you invited to release of the movie, The Ghost in the Shell? I don't know. I'll see if there's a premiere. I know oftentimes art department people get invited to the red carpet, but that's per movie, and I don't know where the premiere of the movie is going to be at. If it's in Los Angeles, then I might get an invite. If not, then probably not. It depends on a lot of factors. So I don't know. If I know, I'll definitely be posting about it. So, would you recommend free version of SketchUp for concept? Yeah, sure, go for it. One of the production designers I worked with, Owen Patterson. I worked with him on the Captain America. He's using SketchUp. So there are production designers and art directors that use SketchUp, and if you can use SketchUp too, they will be happy. I'm pretty sure. Oh, and I think Darren Guilford, the guy who was a production designer on Force Awakens, he uses SketchUp for sure. So it's definitely, it's a tool. Invite John Sweeney on here again, like soon. Yeah, why not? John is a good friend of mine, so I might get him on. Do you remember your exact hours? Like what an average work week was like in terms of janitor work versus painting? So disclaimer, I was doing janitor work when I was in college. I started college and I had to work to make money to pay for textbooks and whatnot. By the way, college in Poland is free. If you qualify, it's free. It's hard as fuck and irrelevant in terms of many of choices of what kind of work you want to do after you're done with it. A lot of friends that I have that went to college, they ended up working in stores or being unemployed, so it's like everywhere else. Free doesn't always mean best, but it was a pretty hard college anyways. I had to pay for textbooks though, so I had to make money, but I decided not to buy textbooks and instead of was buying a gear to learn painting. I used to work half time. In terms of how much work I do when I paint, um, if it's work, I try to limit the amount of hours versus what I'm getting paid for. If it's necessary, then I'll always put extra hours to get the best quality work out there. I'll never compromise work for the amount of hours. Let's put it this way. So I always want to deliver what I'm expected to do, and sometimes add extra. But I try to limit the amount of hours that I work. But in terms of learning, there's no limit. Majority of my day is doing at least something artistic, because it's I don't consider it a work at that point. It's my livelihood. It's my passion and whatnot. I rather do the ZBrush character that is in front of me than go and see a film or something like that. Like it's just what I like to do. I'm a very socially awkward person too, so poo poo. All right, another question I'll read from Facebook. Yeah, what was the worst place I had to clean as a janitor? Fucking, I'm gonna answer that. I was cleaning, like clinics and hospitals, stuff like that. So it wasn't like the dirtiest place ever, but it wasn't clean either. So hospitals are pretty clean, but you have to mop the floors and fucking clean the toilets and shit. So, and people are nasty. People are fucking nasty. But I think it was a good. I mean, any work is good. Any work will, if you consider, taking it seriously, you will learn something regardless what that is. So, for me, being a janitor, that was a good sort of like starting point, because I always had a set of things that had to be cleaned. Like at the end of the day, or at the end of my shift, there's certain things that just had to be done, and regardless of how much time I spent on it, it had to be clean, because it was also like in a hospital, it has to be clean. So so I had a specific amount of work that had to be done, and it just taught me that I just cannot be fucking lazy. I had to do it. So, what topic would you speak about if you were invited to TED Talk? I would probably don't go. Probably, I hate talks. I don't know. If I had an invitation, I would probably talk about. There's certain topics you could talk about, whether it's motivation or critical thinking, or like always learning and resilience. There's so many things to talk about. I don't know. I would have to really know. I would have to be invited in the first place. What were your parents' reactions when you finally entered the industry after years of hard work? I'll tell you what my parents told me when I said I want to work. When I said I want to go to art school, I was told I will not go. Like, they will not allow me because it's a waste of time and life. But something to consider. I come from a country that was under communism for the longest amount of time. So Poland's history, like if you look at the Poland's history, looking at generations back, World War II, which basically depleted the amount of people that were living in Poland by, I don't know, 75%. It was fucking horrible. And then right after that, there was a communism for about 50 years, 40 something years. And I hate communism. I hate socialism too, because my parents lived it. My grandparents lived it. I've heard stories that were horrible. I've seen it firsthand, because I believe first 6 or 7 years of my life were under communism. And then the culture that is right after, right after the Berlin Wall went down, right after the uh, you know, the revolution that basically made the country free and democratic, so we could actually have a democratic elections and choose who wants to have as a leader or as a president, instead of being forced to elect a person from one party. Um, what it did to the country and to, you know, my parents and everyone is just that work, you will always work because it's granted, no matter how shitty the work is, everyone has to work. And anything outside of like working in, again, like a janitor or like your regular mundane kind of work that you would never choose as a career choice because you know it sucks, was something that everyone was expected to do. And if you just said to yourself, I want to be an artist, everyone would really look down upon you. So it's really like not having choice, not having any choice of what you want to do. Let's say if back then I would say, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to do, you know, there's like a lot of people that make really good living by making YouTube videos. If I would say, hey, that's what I want to do, I would be just like, fucking shut the fuck up. You're not going to do that. And I was told the same thing. Shut the fuck up. You're not gonna. I was not allowed to go to art school. Which in retrospect, I think it was good because the art schools in Poland sucks, or it used to suck back then. I don't know how it is right now. I haven't been there for the longest time. But I could understand where my parents were coming from because they were just indoctrinated in that fucking socialist fucked up system that granted you to have work and make money, but it just made it so you had no choice on what kind of stuff you really want to do. Like you could choose to be a doctor or whatever, but like there was a limited choice on what you can do. And also because how the system worked, I remember standing in the line to buy toilet paper, and the line was like fucking new iPhone release. That was the reality. Like you couldn't buy anything in the stores because that was basically the reality. If you want to force distribute wealth, that's basically what happens. It's fucked up. Anyways, but I could understand my parents' decision. I was resilient enough to say fuck off and do whatever I wanted. And, you know, they're happy. They're happy that life is working out well for me. But they would never expect that this would happen because they were just, you know, they never had that mentality. So I was lucky. I was lucky to be resilient. Let's put it this way. Boo boo. What else there? How would a novice value his work? How much to charge? Oh, okay. So in terms of how much money you would want to make, I think I'm gonna make a video. I always say I'll do it, or maybe I'll do a QA or sort of like another episode. Talking about money and how much you should charge. Think about it this way. You obviously have to look at your work with the fresh eye, and if you're considering yourself to be awesome, then again, like go to ArtStation or whatever and compare your work with other artists' work, and if it sucks, then if you're charging too much, then you're probably not gonna get paid. But I think let's say if you're an artist that finished, if you decided to go to, let's say, Art Center or any of the better art schools, and you know your work is valuable and you're actually getting hired, if someone is actually asking to have your services, I would say never go lower than $300-$400 for studio work. It also depends where you live. Like $400 a day, by the way, in Los Angeles, it's really low. It's not that great considering how expensive the city is and how expensive the housing is and everything. So I think like in games, an average salary for artists for an artist is around 80,000 a year, maybe 65 if you're just starting. But again, for LA, it's pretty low. For a senior artist, I would say it's over 100, 120 and more. I've seen people getting much more too. It depends on really who you are and how, not only how good your work is, but how well you negotiate with people too. So, um, but in terms of freelance, if you're working freelance, then you have to consider, healthcare and all the other costs associated that you don't get in in benefits that you would normally get from full-time work. So I would say add some extra to it. I think Ben Mora did I think he did a talk about it on what's the average in terms of how much you can charge freelance and how much you can charge for full-time work. That was pretty accurate, I would say. It will be in the ballpark. So yeah, anywhere starting from 300 in the full-time work, and I would say for freelance at least 400 a day. Again, it's considering you're a good artist, like you're doing a decent job, and you could easily get hired, or you're doing decent work, like decent enough work that you could work on like a good video game, like not necessarily next Uncharted, but maybe like another Call of Duty or something like that. Well, not too bad on Call of Duty. They have some good artists now too. So, but any of those average games would hire for around that money. 65 and up, 65,000 a year and up. For freelance, you should ask for more. And if you're really against the wall, then obviously take any job if you need to. But if you can afford to learn and and get better with your work, I would choose that route instead of slaving away for really low wages. Boo boo. Morning rituals. What are my morning rituals like? First hour of the day. What do I do in the first hour of a day? David asks. I wake up, get a coffee, and start working. That's about it. I just try to tackle work. If my brain isn't intact, I will not look at email. But it's tempting to look at email. I mostly look at email just to look for feedback for the work. If there's no feedback, I close it. I pretty much limited the amount of social media I use. I try to avoid getting on social media as much as I can, and really just batch it. Like if I want to get on Facebook now, I'll get on a specific time and look if there's anything that is requiring my attention. Spend 5 to 10 minutes and then get out. This is just a big distraction that I'm constantly trying to remove from my life, and I've noticed already a good changes. I'm having much more time, and I'm being much more distracted is the best way. Tackle the hardest thing at the start of the day, and then go from there. Like if you finish your hardest kind of work, and you have the rest of the day, that's perfect. I would go that route. Don't start with like easy tasks, nor like, oh, I'm gonna check my emails and check what's going on with my friends on Facebook. That's a waste of time. That's an illusion of completing something, but it's not what's gonna propel you to get things done and really have time to do anything else. Kenneth asks, hey Machi, you told everyone before that you're more of an illustrator rather than a designer. What can you suggest to get better on design, aesthetically and functionality? Don't look at concept art. As easy as that. I think I had a pretty interesting discussion about this with Carlos Huante on previous Art Cafe. And I've mentioned this, like, if you watch episodes that I do, I know it's hard to go through all the mess, and every episode is random. But I spoke about it a couple of times, and becoming an illustrator, that's my personal belief. Becoming an illustrator today is much easier than becoming a designer, because if you want to be a good illustrator, you obviously have to learn composition, and you have to learn colors and lighting and whatnot, but there's so many tools available for you to make that easy for you. You can make good lighting and good perspective, good looking perspective, by just using tools. You don't have to be really super knowledgeable about, you don't have to be professionally knowledgeable about that at all. You can make really well lit scene from the tools that you have inside of your software, like using I don't know, if you're using V-Ray, Octane, whatever, to render in 3D, it's gonna accurately render time of day for you. So that's already sort of like removing quite a ton of work that you would normally have to do if you would paint everything from scratch, for instance. With design, however, you don't have shortcuts for design. You have to know design principles. So regardless of how good technically you are as an artist, there's no shortcut for learning design. And the best thing you could do is, I always had a hard time looking for design books, and instead of that, I started looking at what are the design principles, learning them, and then trying to find reference points to what those design principles are and how they are used in art, how they were used in by masters, like master painters, how 3D artists are using them, how cinematographers are using them, how directors are using, like, there's always a point of reference, and how design principles act in nature. And then functionality is pretty easy. You just have to understand how things work. And if you don't understand how specific thing that you want to design work, then read about it. There's so many resources. Like, if you want to understand how weapons work, I think I had Eden Goroziu, and he talked about it too. Like, he would go, as I recall correctly, he would go and really read and try to find the function of the weapons that he was supposed to design, and understand which parts are doing what. And then the moment he understood what part is doing what, then he could make an informed decision on how the weapon structure should look like, in order for you as a person who's looking at it, you would say, all right, this looks realistic, even though it's a designed weapon, right? Because the functions, the familiarity of the function would be there. So it's a learning process. It takes time. It's not something that you can learn in a day. It just takes time. It's the the more you expand your knowledge on different areas, the easier it will be for you to design things, basically. Jonathan is asking, hi Maciej, personal question. I'm working as Illustrator Concept in a outsourcing video game studio. I've been working here for 2 years, but I've seen some studio ask for at least 3 years of experience. I wouldn't care about what they ask. It's usually HR they're trying to. It's usually the HR. They put like quotas in their requirements. But if your work is good, you know who's hiring, right? Our directors are hiring, not HR. HR are there to basically put things together for you, get like paperwork, and if there's a visa, then visas, and negotiate rates and whatnot. But the person who's going to be deciding whether you're hired or not is an art director or a boss, a person that is the owner of the company. So I would use it as a guideline, and it's usually when they're asking for a couple of years of experience. They're asking about it because they want to make sure that the person that they are hiring knows how the process works. Like, they know that you've finished a game, that you worked through the whole process, so You don't have to be, taught everything from scratch. Basically, that's the whole idea. And I've seen so many fucking stupid people that just couldn't follow simple directions, and I understand why they're doing that. So, but if your work is good, the better your work is, the better chances are going to be that you're gonna get hired. Again, like first work that Eitan Zana ever done was Naughty Dog. He was hired for Naughty Dog. So, or I think he did like some freelance work prior, but it was like fresh from being a student to working at Naughty Dog, basically, more or less. And same to Nick Jindra, you can actually go back to the episodes I had with those guys, and they talk about their, how they got their first work at Naughty Dog. And Naughty Dog is considered one of the best in the industry. So yeah, so there we go. It's the quality of your work, really. Anything else doesn't really matter. What else? Questions? Yeah, dictatorships are the worst. Actually, the dictatorships are the worst. Fuck dictatorships. Let's see. Any plan on getting Daniel Simon or Aaron Beck? Aaron Beck, I want to get Aaron Beck. I know Aaron Beck really well. It's just a matter of whether he's gonna have time or not. Daniel Simon, that might be harder. He's super busy, but I'll try asking. So we'll see. Is there any noticeable disparity in amount of freelance work you can get in certain times of the year? For example, less work in the winter and more during spring and summer. Yeah, there's definitely like fluctuation. Winters are usually the driest years or the driest part of the year. It's usually less going on. Like for instance, in film, the most busy time is towards the end of the year, because like all of the pitch work that they want to do before going on holiday hiatus. Then usually first month, like January, February, are not that hot, and then it ramps up again. In games, it depends. I don't think there's as much of that going on. It depends on when the game is released and when the studio starts to work on the next one. It's very all over the place. So, but in film, it's more tied to studio budgets. So there's certainly the variety. Did you have anxiety with your drawing when you started drawing? That's a question from Lucas. I always have an anxiety. Well, if I'm doing work for myself, I'm trying to get things that I like to do done, so I'm not too anxious about those. When I'm working for a client, there's always certain amount of anxiety, especially if it's a new client, someone I've never worked before. There's always an anxiety whether the work I'm doing gonna click or not. So that's always there. But in terms of working with the clients that I worked before, for instance, I already know what they want, so I'll deliver that and add extra, and then everything should be fine. What's the worst can happen? You're gonna get fired and you have to look for something else. I guess that's not as bad as getting really sick or something like that. So it's the matter of perspective. I always have there's always a certain amount of anxiety you're gonna have towards things, though. There are people that have no anxiety, which is rare. But like even before each of the podcasts that I'm doing, I have a certain amount of anxiety. I was always asking myself, why am I fucking stressing about running my own podcast? What the fuck? But that happens too. So, let's see. I'm gonna go through maybe a few more questions and then wrap it up. I'm gonna have to get back to work, but let's see what else we have here. Is it worth studying graphic design or product design while practicing art on the side? Of course, it's always good to try new things. The best advice I can give you is, um, let's put a caveat there. If you're already working in the industry, anything you can do on the side that will expand your knowledge to different industries or get you a fresh perspective of on things will definitely make your work better. That's one of the reasons why I'm learning ZBrush, for instance. I know I could use ZBrush for work. The things that I'm doing right now, for instance, you might consider like, why would you do something that character artist in video game would do? And I'll tell you why. And it's not a concept art, like from the surface, it's not a concept art, but like when I'll be posting Ghost in the Shell artwork, you'll see some of the work that is maybe not necessarily that great, and I wish I knew what I know right now, because then I would make the quality of that work, exponentially higher, without putting the same amount of effort, like with putting the same amount of effort basically. Because let's say I'm doing this character right now. The beautiful thing about this is not only I've learned a tool that I can replicate and make another character or a couple of more characters in a spare time, and then I can use them for any work in the future. So for instance, if I would have to design like a prop, like the goggles or some kind of prop, head prop or something like that, I already have a head that is really, really cool looking. It's maybe not the most realistic thing just yet. I really want to get there, but I already have like a super solid base to put the prop on. So then I only have to focus on designing that thing, making it as beautiful as possible, and then the renders that I'm gonna put out using, let's say, this head and the new prop, for instance, would be so much better than if I just had like a regular DAZ 3D character face with the default shader. Like the quality difference is so big, but the amount of effort I'm putting towards the actual work is not, it's the same. So it's always useful to learn new things. If you learn graphic design, then you'll be able to be better at the presentation in your work, right? Or maybe use some of the graphic design stuff in, let's say you're designing a cockpit of a helicopter or something, then you can add that graphic design into the cockpit instead of using someone else's sort of rehashed ideas. You could design something that really, really looks cool and complements your overall design of the interior, right? So there's always a use for it in the actual work, but also just expands your knowledge. The more you learn about graphic design and the structure, fonts, and whatever, you will see that it applies to your work too. Like it just expands your knowledge and makes it easier for you. So, what are the differences between American, Canadian, and European freelance rates? I cannot speak for Canadian because I've never been there, and I don't know. Really don't know. American freelance rates are higher than European freelance rates. That's just a fact. You're much better off being a freelance artist in America. You're gonna get much more money in most cases. There are some outliers that get really, really better. It's evening out right now because it's way different than it used to be, let's say even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's much easier to get the more competitive rate right now if you're in Europe, because a lot of work is crossing the borders these days. Like it used to be harder to get the freelance work, regardless where you are. Right now it's changing. It's much easier to be pretty much anywhere in the world and still work for, let's say, a US company. So, but for instance, I know a lot of artists. It's kind of it's kind of weird and crazy because I know a lot of great artists in Europe that are having, maybe a lower rate, and then you have American artists that they decided that they want to go to Europe or be around the world, and they are charging American rates, and it just really doesn't matter. So I guess it's a matter of, again, it always comes back to quality of your work. If the quality of your work is good, then you can ask for a higher rate, and if it's good enough, you're gonna get that. So boo 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 boo. Let's see what else. Are you familiar with deliberate practice? What are 3-5 specific things aspiring artists should be practicing deliberately every day? So, to my understanding, I think I understand it correctly. Deliberate practice would be something that you practice specifically. And that's definitely what you should do. The worst thing you could do is jump around different topics. It applies to pretty much everything you do in life. These days, there's so many distractions, whether it's social media, the barrage of information and everything. If you can focus and narrow down to only a few specific things that you want to learn and really focus a lot of time on that, you're going to be much better off than, say, spending an hour on perspective day one and then learning colors day two. That's not going to get you far. You're going to learn something, but you're not going to be focused enough to really learn a lot. And again, like, I can give an example from my own experience. I haven't been learning that much after I started for like years on and on. It was usually like spread through the time, and most of the things that I've learned was through the work practice. But not until recently, when I really started to learn new things on my own and really put effort towards it, and I did it in both ways. So one would be, devoting maybe half an hour to an hour every now and then to learn something. And that was kind of getting me somewhere, but not far enough. And then really putting time and effort, like, let's say, practicing for a whole week and spending 3-4 hours a day, or 3-4 hours every other day, but really focusing on one specific task. And I've been learning this new thing with the ZBrush and trying to get the workflows and whatnot for last month, and I got much further learning that way than if I would just spread it out across several weeks and only spending only maybe 1 hour on sculpting, and then let's try something else. Like, it's much better to focus. So definitely do that. And I'll read one more question and wrap it up here, guys. I'll try to get more of those QAs, and maybe get like Ash or someone, or maybe Andrew, to do those with me. Sorry. All right. All right, I'll read that question. That's an interesting one. How your wife can understand that you're working all other shitty routines, doesn't matter why you're busy. Well, hold on. Oh, sorry. How your wife can understand that you're working and all the other shitty routines doesn't matter while you're busy. Did you had problems with Amachi? Can you do that? Blah blah blah. Yeah. That's a difficult one. I think you have to start with this. So a lot of people that are not in the industry and are not artists, specifically, most of the people that do a regular job have a perspective on what the work is, and to them the work is 9 to 5, or going to the office and performing your work, and then after you're done, then you go home, and then you're not busy anymore. So there's 2 layers to it. One is, let's say, if you work from home, if you decide to work from home, you have to set up boundaries. You don't want your home to become an office. Let's put it this way. So the boundaries are simple. Like, unless there's an emergency, you're not home. Even though you're not. You're basically working. Um, and that's the simplest rule you can get. And the moment you stop working, the moment you dedicate time towards the family and whatnot, that's the time you should dedicate to family. And if you set up those boundaries and make it really straightforward, then there shouldn't be any problems. When considering, like, let's say you want to put some personal time and do like your personal work and whatnot, and learn, it's really up to um, like, again, it's not really work, it's a hobby, it's your lifestyle, right? So you have to look at what's important, um and really like figure out where to pick your battles, basically. um the more experience I have with family and whatnot, the more I understand the necessity of really plugging, like, just really turn off the computer, plug away, and not really think about work, and really just reset, because that alone can get you more productive. I've started doing that over the last 2 months, where I decided not to take on that much work that I used to. Have more organized day, really spend much more time with family and whatnot. And I can tell you that just from the get-go, I feel way more productive that way. Because if you think about work and art constantly 24/7, it's just like, again, like, everyone's different. Maybe it works for one person, it doesn't work for other. I personally spent last 10 years thinking only about work, and it's a fresh change to not think about only work, and really just dedicate time where you're leaving your phone in the room, or you're turning it off. You go with family, do something that where you're not thinking about anything art related, because you need that reset every now and then. For me, it's a good change. And I have rules. I work from home mostly, so I have rules. When the doors are closed, then I'm considered to be absent, basically, until I open the door. Then, from my studio, I'm basically not there. That's the rule. Unless there's an emergency, like you have to go to hospital or something really bad is happening, then yeah, of course. But otherwise, like, any kind of request, can you go do grocery? Like, no, fuck off. Like, that's not happening. Because if that's the case, that I'm getting interrupted, that means for me it's a reset. I need to get back to the flow of working, which means I've wasted a lot of time. And distractions are a killer in productivity. And when you're a freelancer, especially, it's not like you go to the studio and you can get distracted and get some work done and eventually finish your day. When you're freelancing, there are certain expectations on what has to be delivered. So it's pretty simple. If you cannot be focused and cannot do the specific work that you're asked to do in the time that you dedicated to do the work, then you still have to finish work. And so it means you're going to work overtime, which means you will have zero time for family at that point. So it's really important to have rules, and not let it spill to the other parts of your life, especially when you're working from home. You don't want to associate your home place where you're not thinking about work with work. Like, you don't want to do that. You don't want your home to turn into the office, because it's just going to be a disaster, I would say. You don't want to do that. You want to have rules, not only for your family, but also for yourself. So I think it's a good question to end it up with. I know I haven't answered quite a few other questions that were in there, but I'll try to do it next time. It's a bummer that the actual art cafe that I planned didn't happen, but that can happen a lot. Or that's I think second time it happened in my history of running this show. But I have to respect my guests' time, and when work is more important than talking, we can do this other time. So Rob will definitely be back here on the Art Cafe. It just so happened that he couldn't make it today, so, and I totally respect that. So anyways, thanks guys for coming, thanks for being here anyways, and sorry for the scheduled thing not happening. So I did the QA instead. I didn't want you dedicated your time to get here already, so I didn't want you go back home or turn off the browser empty-handed. So anyways, guys, was awesome to have that little talk. I think I'm gonna do more of those QAs. It's pretty fun. I wish one of the things when I'm talking, I've noticed that I cannot focus on working that much, so I basically was just rotating this model. Maybe next time I'll have some drawing that I can just double around. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, let's finish that at this point, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.